West Virginia, not super thrilled with where they're at right now. They had a chance last week. Now, it was an outside shot, but they had a chance last week at home against Baylor to where if they could have won that game, they'd have been in the mix. Now, again, they just still needed chaos. They just still needed a lot ahead of them. But they got embarrassed by Baylor at home and didn't do anything in the second half. And so Baylor, one of the hotter teams in the conference right now, there's no doubt about it. But fans not thrilled in Morgantown. And a lot of fans want Neal Brown gone. Is that the way you're reading things?
Yeah, fans certainly want Neal Brown gone right now. And the reason why is even go back to Dana Holgerson. West Virginia is used to winning. They win. They go to New Year's Six Bowls. They shock the country. They surprise people. They recruit outside of the state to bring in players who become these proud members of West Virginia Mountaineer football. And what you don't get right now is the classic West Virginia Mountaineer football. And maybe above all else for Neal Brown is, to me, as somebody who is on the outside but respects what that program has done for decades and decades, they have one of the highest winning percentages all time in the Big 12. Some of the most wins of any Big 12 program. And now this, with a head coach who doesn't represent that blue-collar, coal mining country. I don't look at Neal Brown and see the head coach at West Virginia. And if he won more consistently, maybe I would, or maybe he'd get a free pass. But right now he doesn't. And at this point, with the latest rumors, UMass just fired its coach. Seldom do you hear, a Power 5 guy might leave his head coaching post to go to a school like UMass. But he played college football there. He coached there post-grad as an assistant. And if I'm Neal Brown, I've been hearing ad nauseum for year after year, fire Neal Brown. You got fans that are trying to buy airplanes that have a banner hanging on the back of it during a football game that says fire Neal Brown. You can't show up and win the big games. If I'm him, for the sake of my family, for the sake of me, for the sake of just not having to listen to this anymore, take the lowest stress job maybe in the country. You have no expectations at UMass, and it's a possibility with West Virginia likely sticking with him due to the high buyout. There's a possibility he at some point just says, you know what, I can't take this any longer. It's not worth it. And UMass wouldn't be a bad landing spot to effectively rehab your career.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not, it's certainly not heard of, but it's not impossible. Remember Louisville? I mean, look who's coaching Cincinnati right now. Now I know that they're in the Big 12 now, but when he stepped down, I don't think they had quite made the switch yet. I mean, they were going the next year, but no shots at Cincinnati, but that's still, Louisville to Cincinnati, maybe a little bit of a step down. So I do guess it's possible, but do you think he would actually do it?
Yeah, I wouldn't, money-wise, that'll be the big comment is that, it would make no sense from a money standpoint, but just seeing the way that he interacts with the media, seeing the way he interacts in the off-season too when he's talking to Big 12 media days, the guy seems like a pretty tender dude, and I don't get the Kirby Smart gruff, this just good old ball coach vibe from Neal Brown. He's quirky. You go back and watch at Troy, he was in university-sponsored music videos, and you're watching a guy who doesn't necessarily shy away from the social media era of college football in those stunts that he was a part of. And with a guy who's just that aware of everything, I know the rhetoric from the fan base weighs on him. And when this year didn't exceed the expectation they had preseason from so many people internally and so many fans externally, and when last year you were watching him get mayo dumped on his head, now this year they're somehow underdogs at home against 4-6 UCF, and the stadium will very likely be empty at 3:30 this Saturday. If I'm Neal Brown, I might just be looking for an escape no matter what that price tag looks like. The dude's made a whole lot of money in his life. He's going to be okay.
Yeah, and typically what happens is there are conversations that happen that say, hey, you don't want me here. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be here. You either owe me a lot of money or let's come to an agreement. He will get it would shock me if he just forewent any buyout money. Right, usually they're going to make him not whole, but they're going to pay him a little bit to walk away. It'll be a price savings for West Virginia. And I think it would make fans happy. I mean, fans were at the beginning of the year saying hey, if we don't go 8, 9 plus wins, we need to get things together. And they have at times looked fine, but against anybody with a pulse, they've really struggled this year. And, Garrett Green, I don't think is in the spot that they want him to be. There's a litmus, a whole list of issues. And again, can he save it? Like, is he really going to turn it around? To me, that's the big question. Is I understand the cost for West Virginia. I understand that they don't have pockets that are as deep as Ohio State or Georgia's or whatever to be able to just fire anybody at any time. But I also just wonder, man, like, what is your cost in revenue dropping, right? Like with fans not filling stadiums, what is your cost to your boosters? What is your cost to your NIL? And all those things together, to me, feels like it would be about the price of a buyout. So I don't know. If you don't think he can turn it around, like if he's not the guy long term, it's better to cut bait, right, and stop fishing in these muddy waters.
Yeah, and I'm looking at a West Virginia recruiting class coming in, and those that are in the, looking for the next couple of years, and I just don't see enough that you say, oh, we got to hold on to him because he's got so many recruits that are going to play well for him. You look at a Dave Aranda who effectively saved his job via recruiting, or a Joey McGuire at Texas Tech who does such a good job recruiting. They'll give him a couple of years to build a program there. And for Neal Brown, buddy, you've had your 5 years. I mean, you've got to at some point be able to bring in the out-of-state talent and land the highest recruited in-state talent. There may only be 2 or 3 guys that deserve a spot on your roster that come from West Virginia that can help you compete. But as it sits, you're not doing enough off the field to hold your job. You're not winning on the field. You're 5-5. And granted, 4-3 in conference play is not bad for a UCF, for a Cincinnati who's adjusting to the Big 12. But you've been here. You've had a chance to get your guys in to instill your mindset to trust. You asked the fans to trust the climb. They've trusted this for long enough, and it just hasn't worked. I don't see where overnight, in the offseason, somebody snaps their fingers and all of a sudden Neal Brown is the answer for West Virginia. They're prolonging the obvious to me. And TJ, to shoot you straight here, West Virginia is proud of all of its sports programs, and basketball also not very good right now. I mean, they need something to root for. That's a state that thrives off of this. There isn't much. I mean, I grew up in Valonia, Arkansas. We didn't have much. We tied ourselves to college football, to college basketball, to anything good. West Virginia is that kind of state. And this guy's not delivering for them. At some point, the blue-collar fans who are going to have to support your NIL are not going to give money to who they think is a used car salesman.
So it's November 19th. We're recording this almost to Thanksgiving. Pull up from midcourt and give me the next coach at West Virginia.
I mean, there were murmurs. I gave it earlier this year. The Nick Saban conversation is out there, right? And
Jimbo? Is Jimbo out there?
The Jimbo conversations that you use the Mac Brown. I think that's the one you go to. You say, hey, Mac Brown went to North Carolina. So you never really know. Is there a retirement job out there for Saban? There are answers, responses, reasons for a guy like a Saban or a Jimbo to go there. Does it ultimately happen? Probably not. But you hired the really successful head coach of Troy in Neal Brown. So can you dip back into the mid-major bucket? No. I think from this point, you need to go with a very experienced coordinator who's a former head coach. Maybe you go up to Boston and you say, hey, look, you've won a couple of games up here. Maybe you travel over to the ACC or a smaller league and grab a guy who's been a head coach for a long time and rope them into the action in Morgantown.
I like it. Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, at Drake Seats Hole on Twitter or at LO Big 12. And wherever you find your podcasts, Locked On Big 12.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Always a pleasure. Well, that'll do it. Neal Brown, UMass. Come back tomorrow. We're going to give you some best bets in the squad show. This has been, it always will be, Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.